The Ben 10 reboot is one of the most polarizing shows in all of fiction. It genuinely struck fear and disgust into the audience before it even aired. That's all because of one thing that plagues every major franchise, and that is the Reboot Curse. Even though this mythical curse has claimed many TV show lives, against the odds, Ben 10 beat the Reboot Curse. But how did he do it? And stick around to the end to find out the biggest secret the reboot is hiding that makes it even better than the rest. For those who might not know what the Reboot Curse is, it's when a successful TV show, movie, or cartoon goes through a complete overhaul with new character designs or actors, a new story, but the same intellectual property. This sort of thing normally results in a nearly immediate failure and cancellation or huge fan backlash towards that reboot, hence calling it the Reboot Curse. Most times this is done to milk an already popular IP because of the great demand that is pushed by the fans. But the curse is very, very strong. Movies like 2016 Ghostbusters, Powerpuff Girls, and Thundercats Roar are prime examples of shows missing the mark and being cancelled or discontinued not because they have a bad staff, but because it missed the whole point of what made the fans like it in the first place. However, Ben 10 takes a completely different approach to the whole reboot thing in comparison to any other major IP or cartoon, and it all starts with Ben and Gwen. After following these characters for the better part of a decade, we get to see them both be brought back to their 10-year-old selves. Pretty much brand new everything. A new look, a new storyline, Gwen has a new voice actor, but the most important change is the characterization. Let's take Gwen for example. Back in Classic, she was an intelligent sort of annoying know-it-all who was overly concerned about academics. But she was a versed and intuitive fighter, and in most cases, the voice of reason for Ben Tennyson. She created a sort of sibling banter dynamic between herself and the main character, being a sort of foil for Ben in a narrative sense, because most reasonings Ben would have, she would have the direct opposite.
Should I try it again? Just once?
I wouldn't.
No duh, you wouldn't.
In the reboot, Gwen's character is very similar. She is still a bit more mature than Ben. She still captures that sibling banter dynamic, but she has a slight difference in her, which is the way she displays this sibling dynamic. The reboot Gwen actually evolves on the cousin versus cousin relationship, and now both Ben and Gwen are pretty much on the same wavelength. A bit similarly to the relationship we get to see in series that come after Classic. But other important changes are the ones that we can see in Ben Tennyson himself. In Classic, Ben is overconfident, a combat genius, and still doesn't know how to use the Omnitrix very well. While in the reboot, he is overconfident, a combat genius, and still doesn't know. Wait, this is basically the same thing. Ben doesn't change much at all, with the only major change being his storylines that he follows, and I guess the shirt. Oh wait, huh. And that got me thinking about the two of them. It seems like they were both still basically the same character, but with slight changes, as they retained a lot of what worked in Classic and developed on what would have made the show better, like their dynamic. But what is a Ben 10 series without the aliens? And I think the first alien roster he gets is very important to the reboot as a whole. Both Classic Ben Tennyson and Reboot Ben had a very formidable playlist of 10 aliens to start their individual journeys, with enough variety to make each of these guys very useful in their individual stories. I already know which playlist I think is better, but let's break down what makes both so special. The Classic playlist for Ben Tennyson was iconic, with huge fan favorites like Forearms, Heat Blast, Diamond Head, and Accelerate, which aren't only globally loved, but they have diverse powers and abilities. The Classic playlist also has very niche but creatively designed aliens, like Ripjaws, Wildmutt, and Ghost Freak, who have unique styles and power depictions that we have just never seen in fiction before. However, the reboot does something different with the aliens, as it not only brings over the valued fan favorites and popular aliens, but they also swap out aliens for ones we might know or straight up newer transformations. Which I think is a good balance, as it not only gives fans a replica of what already worked in the first show, but it also improves on that by giving us newer situations with different transformations. And I think the biggest improvement comes with one of the more niche alien picks from Classic, which is Ripjaws and his aquatic counterpart Overflow. Both of these aliens are the water guys. They thrive in aquatic environments. Ripjaws is a powerful beast underwater, but when he is on land, he is literally useless. And this is where a huge problem arises when the comparison is brought up. Ben simply doesn't have that issue with overflow. He's able to handle business on both fronts, and he wouldn't be a slippery little fish child if he had fought Vilgax with the red water cannon. The reboot playlist does have a major flaw though when it comes to some of the designs of the aliens, mainly Stinkfly and Wildvine. Both of them have become a lot more humanoid and a lot less alien in comparison to their original series counterparts. It certainly takes away from the immersiveness of the show. I am pretty sure every single fan is outraged about how Stinkfly looks. However, outside of those design issues, the reboot show actually does not fumble on any other major design, with incredible work on aliens like Shockrock, Slapback, and let's be honest, the best Humongosaur design in any series. I am not gonna even cap. And if that isn't enough for them to make up for butchering Stinkfly and Wildvine, they introduced 2 new power systems that honestly blew me away. But let's start with the most electrifying one.
Omni Enhanced! Updated tech, upgraded powers.
A fella could get used to these.
Hero time just got electrified.
This gave every single alien available electrokinetic powers and boosted their abilities along with giving them a shock rock theme design. Hence, very strong saturated blues with a rocky mossy outline on most of their newly formed battle armor. This was a pretty hard design for anyone to hate, honestly, as it not only just gave Ben a completely new gimmick for his Omnitrix, but it also gave him power to round out weaknesses for most aliens. Like, let's take for example Grey Matter's size. It's always been a problem since the very first iteration of the show because of how small Grey Matter is, makes him useless in combat. However, this has now become a complete non-factor because he has a newly formed electrokinetic mech with massive rock formed armor, and that completely turns Grey Matter from being a tiny intergalactic Einstein to literally being Brainiac with an electric Gundam. Dude, it's actually so crazy. Other aliens like Accelerate has become many times faster. Heat Blast is pretty much a fighter jet, and they even fixed the Stinkfly design because this is a superior design to what they had before. I genuinely can't even ask for more, but they still managed to do that. They gave us...
There are 10 Omni-Kicks aliens in the new season of Ben 10. Ready to check them out?
Now, this happened when Ben got a brand new set of aliens like Wrath, Humongosaur, Slapback, and Jetray. It also gave all of the aliens mechanical enhancements that transformed what they did, giving our forearms Android 16 jet punches, and also giving Humongosaur one of the next best designs for the alien, but fire breath like Godzilla. This was also complemented by the Omninaut forms, where Ben would be able to take space travel to a new level with these modes. This was pretty well featured in the movie Ben Tennyson vs. the Universe. It was pretty cool, it's very inventive. These kinds of changes to what the Omnitrix does makes this version of Ben so much stronger than classic Ben. It makes his battles more creative, and it definitely sold many more toys. Now, this isn't a very specific number for the reboot, but Ben 10 as of June 27, 2016 had done 4.5 billion in retail sales globally. Like, that was just in the infancy of the reboot when stuff ain't even started yet, bro. So we can generously assume that it easily crossed $1 billion in sales off of the reboot toys alone. However, there is one major factor that helped the reboot to excel and beat the curse, and that secret thing is respect. The way the crew ended up dealing with the reboot, you can clearly see that they had a fine respect for the source material. They kept most of the designs the same or similar to what we had before. They had a lot of characters that didn't change much, and most importantly, they did not try to downplay or insult what came before it. Now, I know that sounds pretty intangible, but there are plenty of shows like Mulan, Snow White, and even the recent Lilo and Stitch movie that don't hold up to their end of the bargain and actually actually disrespect the source material. Let me give you a direct example. A major theme of the original Mulan movie is with the power of love, intuitiveness, and sheer willpower, you can overcome gender roles to become more than what you have already been predetermined to be. But this versus the reboot movie shows that women are perfect and have always been powerful. I'm all for a pro-women narrative, but this seems like it might have missed the entire point of what the first movie was trying to do. Ben 10's reboot doesn't take that kind of approach. It keeps most of the elements pretty much the same. It's still a show about a fun-loving 10-year-old and his cousin and grandpa traveling in an RV, fighting bad guys and keeping up with alien shenanigans. However, the reboot does something that I do want to talk about a bit, where they create a very interesting change to one of the most important characters in the series, and that is Kevin 11. By giving Kevin an Omnitrix, they completely warped and changed his character dynamic with Ben. Instead of being a completely power-hungry parasite, sort of like Parasite in Superman, he now has his own set of powers, his own set of mutated amalgamated aliens, and his own set of designs, flaws, and powers that we can look to expect from Kevin 11 and his Antitrix. This move probably was one of the most risky things the reboot could have done. However, in my opinion, it was met with a lot of love from the fans, myself included. Hence, the reboot does double down on showing us that you can take the main fundamental things of a series that works, maintaining that with a certain level of respect, and flip it on its head to make something completely new. That kind of respect to understand that change is still good while still maintaining the things that work is one of the main factors that determines whether a reboot is a success or not. And the Ben 10 reboot seems to have passed with flying colors. The reboot itself even outlasted every other Ben 10 show, having been on the air for 6 years. That's 4 seasons, 2 TV specials, and a movie. It's gotten more content than every other series of Ben 10 in its own run. This has surpassed every unsuccessful reboot by a landslide, and even some successful sequel shows as well, as it has even more episodes than The Legend of Korra. At its core, it's not trying to be a different show altogether, but the reboot is just as much Ben 10 as any of the other shows are, even if it's aimed at gaining a new but younger audience. However, what do you think? Did the reboot beat the curse, or is it a failure like the rest? Comment down below, and thanks for watching. Next up on Grey Matter Fanboy, these aliens changed Ben 10 forever. Of course, Ben Tennyson isn't the same without aliens